In the last chapter, we defeated Nepti and added the water jewel as the third piece to our collection of the elemental gems. With the jewel in safe hands and the Loch Kildery's peaceful waters restored, we bid farewell to Colleen and Killiak and depart the Isle of Skye. Stepping through Colleen's transporter, we return to the Crystal Valley to say farewell to Epona after she expands upon our journey in the Eltale book. We're able to return to Larpool quickly via a one-way teleporter in the Crystal Valley, and we'll say our farewells to Lila and the townsfolk before returning to Captain Morrig. It's here we'll begin Chapter 4, finally setting sail toward East Carmaw's capital Limelin, where our father was last seen thanks to Leonardo's information. Chapter 4 is filled with content, questions, and answers. In the wealthy capital Limelin, home to nobles and merchants, we'll meet Queen Deanna, whose hands are full dealing with an escaped murderer and the mysterious death of her trusted vassal, Lord Shrieker. We'll follow the murderer's trail into the Baragoon mine, a vast mining network that recently tunneled into a deep layer of ancient ruins. Exiting the ruins, we'll be greeted by the golden dunes of the Dindom Dries, and deep within the sands of time, uncover the shadow of a kingdom from a millennium ago. Once Captain Morrig docks in East Limelin, he'll mention that he'll be sailing back towards Dondoran, finally able to return to his initial destination and make rounds across the Kildery again. We'll say goodbye to the captain and take our first steps into East Limelin, a small but beautiful county in eastern Keltland that borders the southern kingdom of Highland. As mentioned before, the only two locations to visit of note are the city itself and the Baragoon Tunnel, that's been used as a mine, granting Carmaw much of its wealth over the years. Stepping off the dock and heading straight for the distant Limelin, we'll enter the gate and take in the grand city. By talking with the busy townsfolk meandering the streets, the children playing near the golden fields of wheat, and the patrons having their fill of drink at the tavern, we'll learn a few key things that have occurred in the city over a short period of time. We'll break down these things one by one since there's so much to learn, and once we're finished, we'll move towards Queen Deanna's castle manor to speak with anyone else of importance. In broad strokes, however, we're going to learn three very important things. Our father was indeed here for a time, a noble that handled the affairs of the city was mysteriously murdered, and a dangerous criminal escaped, with all of these events occurring within the same small window of time. First, Nick will inform us that there was a man here recently who looked very much like us. If that wasn't enough confirmation that our father was here, he'd been questioning the populace about a sacred book, but after learning little, he left for Baragoon to travel toward Highland. Nick wonders whether our father made it through the old mine shaft safely, giving us cause to believe that the mine is in fact quite dangerous. Besides this, Jade explains that there's been a rumor that new digging has begun in the ruins deep within the mine. Perhaps these things correlate with one another, so we'll take note of this for now and carry on. For once, we'll learn nothing of value at the inn, even from Shannon, who only remarks on the purpose of building long-lasting cities, but we will find some valuable information at the tavern. Dio explains that the fiefdom owes much of its prosperity to a great nobleman named Lord Hoson Shrieker, since Queen Deanna originally left the city's management to this lord. I say originally since, as we'll soon learn, the great lord recently passed away. Passing by a field where the children play, Roy asks if we've heard that a man named Fargo, a murderer, has escaped the city. Elgin adds to this that Fargo was originally locked within the Tower Jail just outside the city limits, and how he was a magician known to use fire magic on anyone who got in his way. A man by the name of Sheldon will expand on the story behind the criminal the children speak of. In the past, Fargo attempted to take over the town by threat of burning down anyone or anything that opposed him. The lord of the city, Lord Shrieker, managed to capture Fargo and lock him within the prior mentioned Tower Jail. However, after Lord Shrieker's mysterious death, the criminal escaped his cell and fled the city, and the townsfolk believe it's only a matter of time before Fargo returns to finish what he started. This is where things become much more interesting than they appear at face value. Most would assume that Lord Shrieker was murdered by Fargo. After all, he's the man that stood in his way from conquering the city and locked him within the Tower Jail. However, remember that Sheldon told us that it was after Lord Shrieker's mysterious death that Fargo escaped, not before. Why would anyone kill someone as high profile as the Lord of the City only to return to their jail cell? The reason it doesn't make sense is just that, it doesn't. But there is an answer, something often overlooked despite the pieces being laid before us. To solve this mystery, we'll first head towards the jail that Fargo was imprisoned within to search for any clues. The first thing to notice about the building is that there is no apparent damage to the inside or the outside. Heading inside the cell and examining the chains upstairs, there weren't any breaks in the prison chains besides one of the cuffs laying on the floor. Lastly, the door doesn't appear to have suffered any damage, and is simply left agape. These three clues point to one invaluable fact: Fargo did not break out. Fargo was let out. We still need to consider the role that Lord Shrieker's death plays in this, however, as it does indeed play one. Heading toward the opposite end of town, we'll find a dilapidated, boarded-up home. I firmly believe that this was originally Lord Shrieker's home, since the only other luxurious home not crammed within the city center with the rest of the buildings is Queen Deanna's Castle Manor. Following this, we need to consider the damage to the building itself. Besides the fact that the timeline wouldn't make sense for Fargo to have killed Lord Shrieker, why wouldn't there be any visible fire damage to the home when Fargo's repeating theme is he'd burn down anything in his path? If anything, it appears that the home was merely broken into, and once Lord Shrieker was killed, boarded up and left to decay. But if Fargo wasn't the one behind Lord Shrieker's murder, who else would have wanted to kill him? The answer is, it wasn't that someone wanted to kill him, but that they had to kill him to take something from him. I'm going to skip ahead briefly just to put this into perspective, as leaving this until later would make little sense. The Fire Ruby is the one elemental gem left that we haven't earned, and within Quest, no one in the game will mention who held the Fire Ruby before we came to possess it. The reason for this is that Lord Shrieker told no one that he held the ruby, and I consider the fact that, as he's a noble lord and presumably nobility, like King Scottford of Dondarn protecting the Earth Orb, Lord Shrieker had the Fire Ruby passed down to him. What Lord Shrieker didn't count on was that someone learned that he did indeed possess the Fire Ruby, and this thief would eventually break into the Lord's home, kill him, and steal the Fire Ruby. So, once things settled down and Fargo was cleared of any involvement with Lord Shrieker's death, seeing that he was still imprisoned, the thief broke Fargo out of jail and gave him the Fire Ruby to take outside of Limelin. After all, Fargo's sole motivation was to conquer Limelin to begin with. Why would he leave the city at such an opportune time, as the city was now lost of Lord Shrieker, who was the only one person able to stop Fargo? We're not going to get into any greater detail as to why Fargo took the Fire Ruby in this chapter, but it's important to know that this is the series of events that led up to him possessing it. This leads to one question: who is the thief? Was it the same thief that told the prideful Solvering that the Earth Orb was in Dondarn Castle? The same one who told the desperate Zels that the Druids of Normoon hid the Windjade within Windward Forest? The same one that told the impish Nipti the Water Jewel was held by a human at the center of the Loch Kildery? Is this the same thief that could have stolen the Eltale book? After all, someone with enough knowledge and skill to break into the Melroad Monastery's crypts to steal the book would surely be the only one with enough skill to sow this level of discord across all Keltland. All signs point to yes, but the burning question remains: who? And even if we knew who it was, it begs the question, why? This gets us up to speed on where we are now, and helps lay out some of the somewhat confusing Limelin plotline, so we'll go ahead and enter the castle manor and prepare to speak with Queen Deanna. Once inside, there are only a few important characters to speak with besides the Queen. Damon explains how his grandfather oversaw the mines and found the ruins towards the end of the tunnel. Upon opening these ruins, however, monsters poured out and are the reason why the area is plagued with monsters to this day. These men tried to seal up the mine shaft but were unsuccessful in doing so. Coupled with how Jade explained that another layer to the ruins has been discovered, it's safe to say that Nick was right to be fearful of if our father made it through safely, as perhaps the additional layer of ruins unleashed even more monsters. Heading into the throne room, we'll finally speak with Queen Deanna, who is unsurprised by our coming to the city. She explains that she learned of our eventual quest from Princess Flora, who spoke highly of our successes in Dondarn. She asks whether we've come simply to search for our father as Princess Flora mentioned, or if we came to deliver Limelin from the Firestarter Fargo. The outcome is the same despite our answer. Fargo will stand in our way, which confirms our father in the timeline of leaving the city before Fargo escaped, putting him between us. I'm going to quickly do my best to answer a common question. Why is Queen Deanna completely uninterested in aiding Brian, a literal child, with Fargo, a fire-starting criminal? Besides the answer being written mostly in quest design, I think there is an additional reason, primarily being that she's just incapable of doing so. Having spent assumingly years of delegating Limelin's responsibilities to the now murdered Lord Shrieker, the western side of her country only recently reopening due to our success there, and an infamous murderer escaping her city, she's both overwhelmed and underprepared. One could argue that's expecting too much from Quest's story, but I offer this perspective in alignment with my interpretation, so take that as you'd like. The only other interesting things to do in Limelin before heading to Baragoon Mine is to enter the secret passageway behind the throne for some extra items, and to speak with Prince William, the Queen's son. He's not much younger than you, and even believes that he's a better swordsman already, having heard from his mother that you are apparently a great warrior. William serves little purpose other than being annoying, but since I explained our encounter with Princess Flora and Dondarin, I felt it was only fair to do the same with the Prince of Karma. It's only a short run from Limelin to the mine, but it's a long way to reach the end of the Baragoon. The first half resembles a functioning mine, with minecarts, railroads, and heaps of dug-up earth, while the second half becomes the ruins the miners had found later, like we'd been told by Jade and Damon at Limelin. Once within the ruins section, we'll come to find a pathway that's been blocked by a wall of earth, and I believe this is the original pathway to the Dindom Dries both our father and Fargo traveled through before the cave-in. The reason this is important to mention is because through the path we end up taking, we'll encounter someone or something called Shilf, one of the most ambiguous bosses in Quest. Shilf explains that she's been waiting within these ruins for the past 1,000 years for what she calls mammon. She senses but 3 of the elemental gems on your person, which would insinuate that she would have expected someone to have all 4 if they'd already possessed 3. After this, she becomes hostile and attacks. Upon defeating her, Shilf doesn't actually drop anything to reveal further context for either herself or the story. We're actually going to come back to explaining Shilf's purpose at the end of this video, as it will make more sense for me to explain it there instead of here. So for now, we're putting her on the back burner for a moment while we move on. Exiting Shilf's temple, we'll enter the Dindom Dries in the Kingdom of Highland. There's a tent right outside where we can rest briefly thanks to a man named Gelson, but this location serves literally only as a rest point. One could argue that Gelson is an archaeologist being so close to the ruins, or simply a traveler that pitched a tent near the only oasis in the area. But since he doesn't serve a greater purpose in the story for now, we'll not focus on it, as either way it doesn't change anything. The most interesting part of the Dindom Dries is the fact that one large area of itself is a vast open desert without a map marker, so one would understandably ignore it entirely and move on since it looks as though there's nothing there. However, whether by design or not, this desert holds one of Quest's most important secrets, one that is so valuable and vital to the entirety of the story that without it, it's almost impossible to tie together the events of the Day of Grief and the Eltale book. Entering the desert and wandering somewhat southeast, we'll eventually encounter what one might mistake for a mirage, a platform with a giant crystal bobbing overhead. Approaching the platform and taking the steps to its precipice will instantly transport Brian somewhere beyond Keltland in time itself. The Graveyard Kingdom of 1,000 years ago, the place where the Eltale book was opened for the first time, and home to a single cursed soul, King Lavar of the Kingdom of Shamwood. If you've seen part 1 of the Story Explained section, remember that once Epona defeated Lavar, she banished him for his crimes against Keltland. When people would speak of the kingdom that disappeared overnight, Shamwood is that kingdom, and Lavar is here, cursed for eternity, to spend his days in the tomb of his castle. It's here that upon ascending the great stone steps and navigating the silent halls, we'll find Lavar, and can speak with him about what happened on that day 1,000 years ago. This brings us back to Shilf, however, and where she ties into all this. I believe that Lavar wasn't the only one cursed by Epona, and while Shilf wasn't sent to another realm like Lavar was, she was permanently cursed within the temple she inhabits. I'd also argue that it's highly possible the miners of Limelin or perhaps even Gelson had gone through the temple before, but it was Shilf's sensing of the elemental gems on her person and its association with the Eltale book that caused her to appear. This would explain why she's existing for as long as Lavar, and why she appears when someone with the elemental gems is within her ruins. In fact, I would argue that Shilf more than likely played a large role in Lavar obtaining the book all that time ago, which is something we're going to discuss further down the line. In Chapter 5, we'll speak with Lavar, tying our remaining loose ends with himself, Shamwood, and the Eltale book. I hate to end things here, but I want to have something big to look forward to in the next video. Please let me know what you think down below, or check out the other parts of the series if you haven't already. Also, if you'd like, follow me on Twitter for frequent updates. Next section will be out next week. Until then, thanks for watching.